Yesterday, we had a wonderful session with Dr. Renos, and it was really, wonderful, enthusiastic participation also. And so now we're back on day two with our second speaker, who is Dr. Arvinder J. Singh. And before I introduce her, I just want to remind all of you that you can ask questions anytime. You can just drop them in the chat box, and Dr. Arvinder will respond to them after her presentation. And I also want to give you some warnings for the content of today's session, which may touch upon subjects such as depression, anxiety, and suicidality. So before handing things over to Dr. Arvinder, a really short introduction. She's a psychologist and a psychotherapist, a consultant to the UN and guest faculty at IIM Ahmedabad. And an important part of her professional journey has been leading Mission Psychosocial Intervention, which is her work with traumatized populations in politically sensitive zones in India, Afghan refugees, and people affected by disasters such as earthquakes in India, Pakistan, and Nepal. Currently, she is the founder director of Ashoka Center for Wellbeing, a flagship program of Ashoka University that believes in keeping mental health at the heart of education. The center operates with the mindset of well-being instead of diagnosis and focuses on the preventive, clinical, and promotive aspects of well-being. Today, Dr. Arvinder will be talking about therapeutic spaces and strengthening mental health on campus. That's it from me. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Swasti, for that kind of introduction. And to begin with, I must apologize for technology and also sort of say that it's so much of our new reality that actually no longer new, but it's a reality that we have to sort of integrate. And I do talk about it, and I think I just really got to sort of practice it today. I must say it did fluster me a little bit, but I guess all's well. And in case it drops off again, please do understand that that's a new space that we are living with, which is of really, having to create these spaces which then become something that we can connect with. A lot of what I would be talking about is actually, I must give a little bit of the history and the story behind this conference and what we planned. 2 years back, this was, I presented at, I was at a conference in Oxford where we talked about mental health, and mental health in India was being talked about. And I said, wow, it takes us to go all the way to Oxford to talk about what the Indian mental health scenario is. And I think that actually created this space for us to have the seeds of what we would look at innovative mental health practices. And as we started talking about what the Psych clinic and how the nature of Psych clinic has evolved, more than 2 years back, actually, this was pre-pandemic time. So there was no pandemic, and yet we were seeing and feeling the need to redefine Psych clinic, to put mental health and well-being on the map in a way where it belongs. I mean, I can see Dr. Ajay Bakshi also here, and he and I spoke, I think, more than 7-8 years back about how the entire health scenario has to include mental health and well-being. And I think nothing could be more relevant than what it is today. What we really looked at that point and felt was that the Psych clinic or the therapies as were designed earlier, that is why the title, The Past, the Present, and the Future of Psych clinic. In the past, we've had the definition of a Psych clinic as something which is a long journey, long drawn process. And there are very specific therapeutic practices which are really sort of looked at. And then we move, into this current scenario. And of course, going forward, the future, where we know that what we have available and what we really need to have, there is a large discrepancy, and we have to come up with innovative ways of really looking at mental health or attending to this mental health concerns. And I think, just like for every little scratch that you get, you don't run to a specialist, you have something called a little first aid that you would do, or some kind of help and support. In the similar ways, we are extrapolating the processes and seeing how we can bring better mental health to where we are, And so all of what I'm going to talk today is about how we can create these therapeutic spaces and why do we need them now, or do we need them? So all this and more. I'm going to try and start sharing my screen to see. Oh dear. Okay, I can't see. Why does it say more than meetings? In what ways do I get? Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, you can see it clearly.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's wonderful then. So this is an image from, one of my workshops that I did in Kashmir, and I share this image to actually set the context that therapy does not really, or therapeutic space does not necessarily get defined by a counseling room or a therapist room or an environment which is sterile and safe and within the four walls. The first principle while I was training to be a therapist was actually to get into the community as just another person and not wear your specialist hat and come. So this is one of the images from my work in Kashmir, which I wanted to share. This is a group of people who were blinded by the pellets, and we all know what happened at that time in Kashmir. So this is an image from there, and I was working with these people, and none of the people, professional or otherwise, knew that I was a therapist, what my qualifications were, what my skill set was, or what I bring to the table. It was all about being with the community to create that kind of safety of space. So I just wanted to share my story because that's what I'm building the whole my presentation today on. When we talk about like, why do we need this kind of, strengthening of mental health on campus? Now more than ever, because I think enough has been spoken about pandemic, but just to really put some facts, which are just quick 3 facts. WHO states for India, 1 in 7 report to feeling depressed or having little interest in engaging. And I think all of us over here who are present, are on some kind of spectrum on anxiety, not just all of us who are present, everybody. And I say that very safely, everybody is on a certain spectrum of anxiety. And the pandemic has actually brought that about. A bit of a mild anxiety, we've always known how to handle, but now people who've been on the milder spectrum of anxiety have actually moved into the moderate or severe spectrums. And therefore, nothing could be further from truth than the fact that WHO's statement about the fact that we are so many in the age of 15 to 24 who are feeling depressed. Also another meta-study which has reported the doubling of prevalence of anxiety and depression symptoms. Another study by the Healthy Minds Network, which is of course on American college students, but I'm pretty certain we can extrapolate it to our situations as well. Some of the student concerns that have been presented, and this is largely, around conversations from our counselors and students that they present. And once again, I say, and some anecdotal also from college students all around that I have been speaking with. These are largely the concerns that are coming up. And of course, it shows a lot on in the academic space, but generalized, one finds anxiety, depression, mood disorders. If they were prevalent, they've become even more intense. If they were not there, they have become one of the ways of dealing with the situation. The concern is around virtual medium. I just, of course, experienced it just as we started, which would be something that wouldn't happen on a one-on-one, because even if the slideshow didn't work out, the PowerPoint didn't work, I would have personally been there. But I suddenly felt just so cut off and helpless in that state for a few minutes when I did not know whether I will still have the support of technology or I will have to beg off and reschedule this. The relationships have become a big concern. The domestic violence, and this is not, I'm not talking about mental health, but even on campus, but otherwise also has gone up. Students have generally reported lack of privacy, the dysfunctionality in family, lack of motivation, procrastination, that meh kind of feeling, uh, gender sexual violence, neurodivergence, isolation, and a lot more that comes with it. And of course, in some of the data collation from the last year, we've seen that the significant problem areas, as you can see on the right-hand side, the anxiety is the top of the charts, was the biggest globule, followed by depressiveness and suicidal ideation. Okay, the problem areas presented have been a lot about online exhaustion, academic stress, adjustment issues, because at Ashoka, we still have some students who are on campus, right? And adjustment issues have been also for students who've gone back home, and therefore they've had to readjust to being back home. Of course, the social anxiety has gone up, because people who are not now they're used to being on their own in their little bubbles, are now finding it difficult to relate to this new spaces and being back on campus. There is, of course, a lot of theme of grief and loss, a lot of self-esteem issues, body image issues, which again, not that they were not prevalent earlier, but they have become even more exacerbated now. And the trends that we have noticed in the shifts that we've noticed across these 2 years have been, with the first wave, there was a very, very, very high level of anxiety and uncertainty. A lot of helplessness and hopelessness, because it was very sudden and it just continued. The second wave had a very intense theme of grief and loss. And of course, online burnout, because it was the students were, and of course, all of us constantly felt another month, another 2 months, and we'll be back. And it just carried on. And that prolonged kind of trauma has a certain effect, which now with this ongoing third wave, this prolonged kind of uncertainty and trauma has led us to feeling disappointed, lack of motivation, a lot of procrastination, and inability to work. It's been showing in the academic world a lot, but I'm pretty sure that all of us have felt similarly in our workspaces. I'm going to present some statistics about the mental health resources, and I must, of course, put a rider. These are not the exact figures, because in India, it is very, very difficult because of our data collation system is not that spectacular that we get every bit. But this is something that I picked from the Indian Journal of Psychiatry. It was a 2019 volume. And they, of course, have collated from different sites. And they have put a rider that, because it's like everybody still does not upload on the official websites, we only have 9,000 psychiatrists, which comes to about 0.75 per 100,000 population, right? What we need is anything more than 3. And in affluent nations, it is 6 and above. Now, I must confess, I don't know how these figures have come. So those of you with analytics, please, I'm challenged on how these figures have come. But if the Indian Journal of Psychiatry says, I do know that they have some official and some reliable resources whereby they have come up with these figures. But with the numbers that we are seeing, about 2,000 psychiatric nurses, and even if it was, and it seems like about 700 people do a post-graduation in psychiatry every year. So even if we were to add the last 2 years or 3 years, we would have only increased marginally. And this is assuming that people haven't left or retired or any other thing. But clearly we see that the numbers are nowhere near the ideal. And therefore, it is increasingly important to bridge this gap through innovative ways. Of course, it's needless to say, we need to increase the resource allocation. There is absolutely no question we need to put more resources into mental health. That is all through academic spaces, all through industries, everywhere. We need to create awareness. We need to open conversations, because mental health is still the most not understood, misunderstood, invisible kind of injury or issue. So people tend to not look at it and not want to talk about it. Also, there's a lot of bias around seeking help, because people who seek help are considered to be weak. We have a lot of lack of awareness. So therefore, the need is that we bridge this gap through actually building capacity within the institution. Because even if the policies were to change, even if we were to have more seats open in universities for counseling psychologists, for psychiatrists, for psychiatric nurses, for social workers, it would still take a lot of time before that gap gets bridged. So it's only pertinent that we build capacity within the community, within the institution, dispel myths around mental illness and treatment, and have a lot of resources and funds allocated towards advocacy, towards early intervention, towards actually just being able to identify at an earlier level, and therefore be able to sort of contain the problem. One of the ways we can do is actually within the community, we can train first responders. So where there are no counselors, where there are no psychiatrists, where there are no psychiatric nurses or social workers, we can train the civil society people, volunteers, students who are interested in helping, being compassionate, who have some time. They can be given some basic skill set to be able to help people around them and their own selves. And of course, in the space of early intervention, it is really about when you can sort of contain at the level of stress, a lot of the times we can avert a crisis. More about it later, but really coming to what exactly are we feeling? I mean, at this time, there's a myriad of emotions, and they're not all just anxiety, fear, isolation, grief, etc., etc. But there's also there's hope, there's resilience, there's a sense of bonding, there's empathy among people, because this is what has happened. We usually talk about the pandemic as only fear, isolation, grief, anger, and hopeless. Of course it's there. Of course it's more than what it was. Of course that engulfs us. But also what has happened through the time is a lot of people have also come up and helped other people. So there have been various stories of how people have helped their neighbors, how they've checked in, how they have meals have been cooked and sent. I know that in my colony, there was a lot of people were cooking meals and sending meals to people who had COVID patients or elderly people. During lockdown times, people were reaching out to each other, sending meals. There were other ways of communicating. There was also a lot of spreading of hope, of resilience. We will come out of it. There was a whole lot of uncertainty. Nobody knew how many variants this virus had. People started to compare it with so much more about the Spanish flu and so on and so forth. And then came stories about, this is a man-made virus. So we have absolutely no control of how many variants and where it's going to take us. So the questions, the lack of answers, the lack of enough assurances led us to feel a certain way, led us to have more empathy and more sympathy towards those who were less fortunate, so to say. There was a very heightened sense of compassion and resilience as well. We understood and we accommodated. We actually had a lot of people checking in on each other and bonding in a way that helped. So with these myriad emotions, with uncertainty still at the center of it, and a sense of loss, I don't know how we define that loss, but this loss was a loss of the mojo, the control, the identity, because we really don't know who was controlling our going back, to our normal selves. We thought 21 would give us some hope. Well, you know what happened. We thought 22, we are still limping, okay? We're still sort of wondering on how to now, work through this Omicron. And but still within all of this, there is something that we need. There is something that we really still need to contain. And what would that be? we need to feel actually heard and understood. It's not just at the physical realm, but emotionally it has drained us. That uncertainty that has led us to feel hopeless and helpless in many times, or even that kind of loss of motivation, it still means whatever we are feeling, we need to feel safe, protected, cared for, connected, feel productive, and be heard and understood. Because end of the day, because if we say everybody's suffering, that still doesn't take away from what I am feeling emotionally. My need to be heard is still there. And when I put it in the academic setting, can you imagine what students may have gone through? I mean, while we were analyzing the data at our center, we found that there were a lot of first years who had reported. There was a spike in the first years compared to earlier years. And why that would be? Because the first years have still not had the experience of being on campus. They've still have been reeling with, no graduation ceremony at school. They've not had their continuation parties that they have. They've not had their farewell parties. They've not had so much of connect that they had at the school time. They've not really had time or the physical space to say goodbyes and to get onto campus, and then to be an online mode of learning, plus not knowing how to grapple with this new way of learning, not having your old friends to carry you through. All of this has led to feeling emotionally quite vulnerable. And therefore, all these emotional needs need to be contained. And someone needs to be doing that. And of course, we've seen there are lack of counselors. Most universities do not have adequate counselors. Once again, the figures around, are probably 250 to 300 students per counselor. And what we see is that, of course, what we have is way, way, way less. In fact, I'm not sure if all the colleges in Delhi University and the universities in India have counselors, or how many counselors. I'm told sometimes there's just a visiting counselor, maybe a couple times a week for a couple of hours. It is absolutely insufficient. And I think more than the counselors, we really need that space, that therapeutic space where we can actually just talk and feel better. We feel contained. So a therapeutic space, though technically defined, would be that room which has a certain sense of calm and a certain sense of emotional safety. How I define it as not just a physically safe space, but the one that offers an emotionally safe environment and an opportunity to grow, to feel whole, to feel empowered, to build hope and resilience. This is keeping in tandem with the definition of well-being through the Euromanic perspective and not just the hedonic perspective. So, which means to have like a sense of purpose and be better than where you are. And I think given the times, we need this therapeutic space. And once again, if there are not enough psychiatrists, counselors, therapists, psychiatric nurses, or any other spaces, we need to create this within the environment that we are in. Can we do something to create this space? Of course we can. Of course we can. We can do it for ourselves as well as we can do it for the environment that we are in. For ourselves, very simple things like just going back to basics. Having a rhythm to the day gives us a sense of control and purpose. What people have really talked about, during the pandemic times is not having like a sense of control or purpose because something else or someone else is controlling, right? And the whole day stretches being a work day. For the most part, the whole day we keep feeling as if we are working. You read your emails midnight to 4 a.m. in the morning, you're responding, you're eating, you're also meeting your friends. You're doing just so much within that time. So there is no sense of control of your day or of your time. Having a rhythm to the day really helps. And how do we have a rhythm to the day? By having routines and rituals. Look, when it was pre-pandemic times, we would pack our bags, we would get ready, we would go to work, we would go to a university, we would go meet, have coffees, we would have our moments. None of those routines and rituals are there now. They're all enmeshed, and there are no boundaries. We are just working within any time and any space. Having a boundary, a routine, and a ritual gives a sense of control to the day. Simple things like a wake up time and a sleep time. Simple things like having some form of exercise, some self-care, being in the present moment, caring for a pet. It all provides the much needed human touch. Okay. You may have seen that people really took to, in the first lockdown time and second, they took to really cooking, gardening, and so on and so forth. And actually, that's really like literally giving birth to some sort of life that gave them a sense of well-being. However basic it sounds, it actually, and which is why also you may have found that a lot of kitchens in the neighborhood mushroomed. The joy of also being able to help people, to cook, to create, was something that was actually very therapeutic. So for your own self, you can build a therapeutic space by just having your routine, ritual, boundary, some sort of self-care, yeah, and some sort of, carving some time for your own needs and your own emotional needs, right? Building that hope and resilience, because you see now people started trying to get control of their identities by working harder, by trying to be more productive. In work situations, actually companies probably started thinking, now that you're not traveling, you have more time, you can be more productive. Expectation became more. Some of the faculty, my friends who are faculty members, started saying there was more pressure on them to be more productive in terms of now there's more time for research. Okay. And a lot of the faculty tenure is connected to the research and how much are you writing. And, so there was an intense need to be more productive. People said, okay, I need to learn a new language, maybe write another book, maybe do more work. Actually, that is counterproductive. Please do know that this is not a normal situation, whatever that normal is that we define. So our response of being less productive will be a very normal response. So let go of the need to be as productive or more productive than you were in pandemic. And also let's accept there are multiple realities now. We are all in each other's homes, so to say. I mean, of course, for those of you whose faces I can see, some of you have virtual backgrounds, but I mean, look at it, you're virtually in my home space. You can see where I am. Look, you can see my reality. There are multiple realities. Right now, while I'm speaking, something may happen. Someone may walk in, somebody may ask. And those are all my realities as a mother, as a woman in the home, as a spouse, as a daughter, etc., etc. And there might be things that happen. My pet might crawl in my lap, and so on and so forth. What we need to do is to integrate these realities in our work situation. Many of us are also going through a lot. We are bringing our entire selves, our entire home into our workspaces. Okay. So sure, do not hesitate. If there are people who've joined today who are from the industry, please do understand integrating these multiple realities will actually make people more productive, because then they don't have to hide, and now is not the time when you say make the home and the workspace separate, because they're enmeshed. So you cannot separate the two. So it's much better that instead of hiding, we integrate these realities. When we integrate, when we give some time to our people to talk about what's happening, we also find a vocabulary of empathy and compassion, where we also come up with ways of helping each other, of just talking, sharing some things that have worked for you, not necessarily talking stories about pain and anger and frustration. Important to do that, but also on how frustrated you felt, and how you took care of it can actually be something that would help someone else. Also, sometimes just to listen to the story and to have that empathy and to build that compassion in this new vocabulary, because that is what it is about. It's not individual resilience. The way forward is collective resilience, because when collectively we help each other become resilient, that's when we actually are able to cope with the current, with the situation that we have. And that is, and we need to see it through the lens of progress and not productivity. I mean, how much better am I? Am I as a team being able to contribute more than I was doing before? And before is not pre-pandemic. And how much more can I bring to it? How much can I help another person to bring something to the table, which is the best that they can? And if you're going through, I mean, we're all carrying emotional burdens of some sort or the other. I haven't yet met anyone who in the second wave has not known of someone they knew, whether it was in the neighborhood, a relative, a distant, a close relative, a family member, a professional colleague, or their parent who lost their lives in the second wave. So we all are carrying some sort of pain, grief, or emotional burden. It is important to talk to someone. It is not a weakness. It is a sign of strength and building resilience. You know, a lot is being said about vulnerability and resilience, vulnerability and inner strength. I think I won't dwell more on it, but just I'm sure you get the drift of what I'm trying to say here is that talking is helpful. If you talk, you dispel, you know, the whole myth of people are weak if they talk. If you talk, you also become a better listener, you know, because if you talk and you feel unburdened, you also slowly learn, not that it's a directly leading to, but you learn how to really tune into other people's emotions as well. And that, I guess, it's the best gift you can give. I do sincerely feel that, you know, time is the most beautiful gift, and it's a fantastic resource, and it's quite renewable actually. And you know, it's if you can, please give. And before I forget, I want to thank you all for sharing this wonderful gift with me today, this evening. Be of help, like just listen without interrupting, judging, or moralizing. You know, having constructive conversations, just occasionally reaching and checking in with people is of great help. Be a first responder. How do we become a first responder? It's a very simple skill set. You know, it's a training which we do at Ashoka Center for Wellbeing at Ashoka University, where students, faculty, staff members, they are trained over a short training program in identifying stress, distress, and crisis. Stress would be something that we all feel, you know, on a regular basis. I experienced stress as I was not able to log in. You know, somebody else may have experienced stress in a certain other way. I think every single day we are grappling with stress, and we do manage. And sometimes that's a little protracted, you know, and we talk to someone, it helps us. We go for a jog or a run, it helps us. You know, sometimes we eat and it helps us, and so on and so forth. We sleep it off and it helps us, and it's okay. Sometimes for a continued period, we don't really look at it and we power through, as we call it. We power through, and it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we've still not been able to sleep well or eat well or exercise or have a routine or be able to focus or concentrate. Do know that we've moved into the space of distress, where there might be more symptoms, like maybe there's an increased use, or we start using substance or alcohol. There is a lack of interest in your hygiene, or there's lack of concentration. You know, there is some sort of talk of philosophizing about the futility of life or work or situations. Maybe there's some kind of obsession with death, dying, and reading about it. These are all signs of distress. And if you find someone, you know, who's feeling like that, you know, do know that they are in distress, and they need to be connected to a resource such as a counselor at Ashoka Center for Wellbeing, with the students, you know, walk in, or other students bring students in to sort of talk to a counselor. And if the distress is not handled, or sometimes there's a situation like the second wave, people losing their near and dear ones, it becomes a crisis. A crisis is not necessarily something that builds from stress to crisis, but unattended stress unattended distress can definitely lead to crisis. So whereas there is stress, having an anxiety attack can become distress. And if that is not handled and that goes on continuously and regularly and more often, it becomes a crisis, as in panic attacks, severe panic attacks, right? And handling crisis means immediately asking for help, connecting people to the right resources. So being a first responder means identifying stress, distress, and crisis. And sometimes I tell people that, look, if you don't know where this falls, please assume that the worse than the lesser one. Yeah. It is important to build rapport with people. That's what we talk. And it's okay to go and ask people, hey, is everything all right? We are very scared. We've also become very self-reliant. We also have become very individualistic in many ways. So we don't really reach out because we worry whether we are intruding in someone's space. Are we doing the right thing by asking the question? So is it okay to do that? Please do know, if somebody is in distress, they do like being asked how they're doing. For the most part, they are able to talk and relieve their burden. And as far as people who are feeling suicidal are concerned, asking a question of how are you doing, or are you thinking of ending it all, actually gives them a window to speak about what they're going through. Respond with empathy, with compassion, ask the question, make the referrals. And what we also cover in the training, this is some of the things that we do: following up, do's and don'ts during crisis, and of course, top of the line, although it's at the bottom, self-care, on how to take care of yourself, because that's how you're also actually, opening conversation. You're actually encouraging people to open conversations about, how about mental health and about well-being. Going forward, I strongly feel that we need global conversations which are inclusive and which use the language of empathy and not just productivity. We need conversations which are anchored in purpose, which look at progress and not victory or productivity, whichever way it's defined, and which also focuses on staying connected with the source of support. We all have it, we all know. And, at the Ashoka Center for Wellbeing, I'm just going to talk a little bit about it and stop, because this is a center that it's 5 years old now. We are in the 6th year, and we built this center with, with the attempt to actually operate out of a mindset of well-being rather than diagnosis. Because in the mental health, one has always seen that everything is looked through the DSM manual perspective, and people are fixed. As a mental health concern, I think it is important for us to really focus on the mindset of well-being wherever I am. So it's not about illness. Wherever I am, I can be in a better space, have a more fulfilled life, have a better sense of purpose. And what the center does is we focus on the preventive, clinical, promotive, all 3 aspects. Why do we do this? Because we just feel that it's not when you're not able to concentrate that you talk to someone, but the fact that everybody, every stakeholder, be it the parents, be it the students, be it the staff, be it the faculty, everyone can contribute in building a narrative of well-being on campus. So at Ashoka, we provide this safe space. It is, of course, free and confidential service. There are a lot of things that we do, but you can visit our website and see what all we do. But what I wanted to point out was that our focus is on promoting the value of good mental health and capacity building through skill building. So we believe that everybody can actually take care of themselves and people around them, and also connect them. Going back to the slide of the paucity of resources, we can actually be the in-between, the paraprofessional space, between the person who needs help and between the mental health professional. So we really, as the Ashoka Perspective, if you see, there is parents, faculty, the admissions team, the student, the peers, the community reach, everybody that we can. And the whole deal is to destigmatize seeking help or talking about mental health, and to demystify. Demystify, because we need to remember that it's not just professionals, but anyone can contribute to the well-being and mental health. These are some pictures of, the advocacy and self-awareness, which will just give you a sense of what we do. This is an installation that we did in the India Art Fair, which was really, really appreciated. It was a week-long workshop that was done with the students, and they came up with the ideas. They also, sort of constructed poetry, prose, they wrote stories, and it was focused on identity, building identity, and therefore moving out to go within was the title. And it was really, really, it was a beautiful, as you can see from the images, spectacular kind of a presentation that they made. And these are some of the testimonials that the students and others have given to us, and extremely grateful for this. This is something that really makes us carry on the work. We also have a student government, which has a ministry for well-being. So they work very closely with us in terms of organizing the first responders, the gatekeepers training, the many, many initiatives that we have on campus. We have a de-stress day, we have a well-being day, we have a gratitude day, and we just basically bring students together in very so-called non-threatening kind of spaces, which build conversations. We also have many other groups and clubs which are focused on mental health. And of course, we've been recognized also by American universities and places where they have actually seen how we've built our support systems. I am trying to get to, sorry. Yeah. I just want you to hear this, which has been done by one of our students in his own voice, written by him and in his own voice.
I feel powerless. I can't seem to climb the wall that's preventing you from seeing me perfectly clear. It is the same feeling holding me from sharing and shedding tears. But I feel like letting go now, because I can't hold it any longer. I feel dry, but right by your side, I feel stronger. Please hold my hand, pat my shoulder. Are you seeing my demons? Is it feeling colder? Yes. Don't cover your eyes. Please open the doors. Because if you will the power, it shall be yours.
So this was something done by a student. I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for your kind attention and time. I'd like to just sort of end by saying that therapeutic spaces are not necessarily only in the professional spaces. Therapeutic spaces are spaces that we can build one-on-one for ourselves and for people around us and in the larger community. So I think going forward, what we need to do is not just wait for policies to come, for more resources to be allocated, but also to see what can I do. I would be very, very happy to hear what is the one thing that if you feel you can take back from here, that you could, after our conversations today, that you could do for yourself and for someone around you. It could be a family member, it could be a neighbor, it could be your community. So the way forward, the future and the present of the Psych Clinic is in building these therapeutic spaces. Thank you very much. I'd like to now open for Q&A. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, or any reflections that that you may want to make.
Can I get the ball rolling, Arvinder?
Sure, Ajay.
Sure. So I just want to make two observations. One is that we all knew that mental health was a significant problem. I was just reading Harrison the other day, old textbook of medicine. 30% of people have some mental health problems or the other, and this is before COVID. So the point I want to make is that this is a strange thing to say, but in a bizarre way, COVID has brought mental health out of the closet. I have my friends who are CEOs who are saying, look, I need to take an afternoon nap because I'm suffering from long COVID. Now, probably he always needed to do that, but he was too ashamed to say it. but now it's okay to talk about it, and it's a real problem, right? I mean, he does feel tired, and he does feel his wife is having some issues also with COVID related. So I'm suspecting there must be some underlying mental challenges as well. So the broader point is that it has forced people to acknowledge that this is a real problem, and given the size of the problem and the size of the professionals, your emphasis on well-being and community support is really important and timely, because there is no other way we can deal with this as 8 billion people who are living on this planet. So we got to help each other. And so I think those are just brief points I want to make.
Yeah, thanks, Ajay. Thanks. Coming from a medical practitioner, it's actually, it validates it even more. Yep. Thanks for that. So, Asti, can we have it back to the, the window mode? Okay. Any more comments? Any? I know sometimes it just seems like I don't know what to say to that. But anything that that anyone would like to share on, stuff that you're doing around. I mean, I see a lot of my colleagues. I know they do a lot of stuff.
Doctor, I think Dipakshi has her hand up.
Sure. Yeah. Go on, Dipakshi.
Hi, Doctor. Thank you so much for this session. I just like to, I have a little reflection of mine to share here. So basically, we were in isolation RH2 for in the hostel for a couple of days. And for the third day that we actually had to go out, I had made my plans, that it's going to be a lot of fun. Finally, we're getting out. And the very next day, we get the RT-PCR report, and I somehow test positive. I was already in some kind of a downward spiral at that point of time, because there was a lot of things that were gathering my headspace and really screwing it up. So eventually, when I got the positive thing, it was kind of a setback. But now that I'm here in RH5, the quarantine center, I just feel that the most basic things have actually kept me sane, because I know that this is literally the last thing that I can take, and I can't quite go ahead with this. And I'm not somebody who, really caters so much to my own. I have a master's in psychology, but I still don't really give my headspace the due attention that I'm supposed to. So, but eventually, people that I hadn't really socialized with, they're all texting, and the close friends that I have, them texting me, trying to dive deep into the things that I used to do. I used to play the guitar, which I hadn't since a few years. I finally got to pick that up. People just checking in and just knowing that you have the right people around you, that just makes a lot of a difference. This had to be the point where my depression for real starts, but it actually turned out to be probably the best week of my fellowship yet. And I'm actually I can't say that I'm having a good time at the quarantine center, but it's definitely not as rigged as it was supposed to be. So I really appreciate you having this thing and focusing on how interpersonal relations and connections are so important in just keeping the sanity. So really, thank you so much for that.
Thanks a lot, Dipakshi, for sharing. It means a lot, because the only things that one hears about isolation is all dark and depressive. And thanks for shining that light to say that, it did actually, there were people who were reaching out, and you were reaching out. And I think that's what's going to make the world keep going. Yes.
Professor Raja, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, Arvinder. Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to, so I'm in the kitchen, so that's my space here. I'm making my dinner. So integrating that. But so what I wanted to share is something that happened just yesterday. I've been teaching a course, Ashoka X Horizons. So that's the course that addresses high school students. And it was an intro course to philosophy. And so we had our sharing round at the end of the course. And one of the things that really struck me was, among all the nice things they said, well, we've been at home for about 2 years, and we don't have these opportunities to actually engage with the topic with others with fellow students in a safe, constructive, non-judgmental environment that a classroom can be. And so it really struck me that they said for 2 years I have not had a conversation of the kind that we've been having here for these 6 sessions or whatever it was. So I found that quite, of course I was very happy about it, but I also thought, okay, so that it really means that as faculty, as teachers, we can also create therapeutic spaces in a very different sense, right? Not in the way that we're there to listen to individual issues that people may be facing, but just by providing a space in which they can do something that gives them stability and that lets them grow, lets them voice their opinions and listen to each other, respond to each other in ways that the pandemic has made really difficult. So I just wanted to share that as sort of a story that really sort of moved me yesterday. The other thing that I wanted to say, and I really don't have a well-formed question here, but one thing that strikes me is that you like the metaphor of space, so this space, this therapeutic space, or this space of mental imbalance or lack of mental health is very medicalized. And so I like this focus on well-being because it doesn't imply this kind of medicalization. And I often engage with students or have students who then reach out to me after a while, tell me that really they would have liked to engage more in the classes, but they were on XYZ medication and the side effects were so severe that they just couldn't make it. So I'm not sure what, again, I don't have a well-formed question here, but perhaps just signaling that I like this focus on well-being because I find this medicalized approach in many ways counterproductive with respect to creating the kind of experience that these students have shared with me yesterday.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Raja. And I know for sure that you are one of the faculty that I know that does create a therapeutic space for their students. Swasti, may I request you to, if you're comfortable, to share your experience of, Swasti is one of the people who also took the gatekeeper training, the first responders training. So do you have any kind of anything to share about what your experience has been as a first responder or somebody who's received that training and how you would see that?
Sure. I mean, I think I've been lucky enough to participate in these sessions in a number of capacities. Was just as part of the first responder training when we got an email for it, but also they do it for cohort leaders, they do it for peer tutors, and in these capacities I've found myself sort of engaging with these ideas and these different roles. I think that's been especially especially relevant as a peer tutor, which I started doing online, and it's one of those roles where you're only interacting with first years. And I remember among my peers also a lot of apprehension that how do we help students if they come to us and they want to talk about things that aren't academic? We know the academic bit. What do we do if they want to talk about what's going on at home, or if they're struggling, or just everything being online, and how do we help them? And I think that some of the things, I think a lot of the things we learned are things that you touched upon today, Doctor. But I think just that it was, I know it was for my peers also just like really helpful to know that there is something we can do, there is some way we can help, even if we can just sort of offer very basic assistance in terms of being there and letting them have that conversation, but also knowing when is the right time to sort of direct them to somebody else, and not knowing what is your own boundary as well. I think those distinctions are really important, and it's so helpful when somebody guides you through it. And I think those are some things that I got through these sessions. And I've also gotten to be with the ACWB in like an intern capacity. So I think that stayed with me also, as just thinking about well-being in these different ways, and uh, how do we sort of bridge that gap where people feel like there's nothing that you can do to help each other. I know it comes up in interpersonal relationships all the time, and I think I mean, I'm still figuring it out. How do I help my friends, and how do they help me? And it obviously varies person to person, but it's helpful to know that that uh, there are some strategies and some things you can do. You know when to identify what's panic and what's distress, and how do you, where and when do you step in. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. No, I was just curious what your impressions were, because I do know that at Ashoka we start actually with the orientation program where we also talk to the parents. And what I found is that even in that interaction, typically after my session in the pre-pandemic days, we would have tea. It would be a tea break for the parents. So there would be so many parents who would come and talk about it and feel so relieved that here was a place which could talk about whatever it be. And again, it's not about being on medication or depressed or anxious or something, but just the fact that if there is anything that's troubling, that's coming in the way of your Ashoka experience, we are here to help. And I think that's what's really stayed uh, with me as an experience of being a professional here as well as a parent at one point. So yeah.
Doctor, if I can add, that you mentioned the parent orientation, and I know that after that orientation, I remember being quite concerned prior to the orientation, because it's like, oh no, there's somebody else talking to my parents about mental health, something I've been working on, sort of teaching them things about, making sure they are on the same page as me. And I know they emerged from that orientation, and I don't know what you said to them, but they had a really sort of changed outlook on it, in terms of, I don't know, I think that post that, it wasn't like some foreign concepts of, oh, this depression, this anxiety, but just like very accessible things that they knew they could help me with, it and they knew how to support me in smaller ways. So it was definitely, I know it changed a lot for them, much more than I would have expected, just as like first day of college. um, Really unexpected.
Well, thanks so much, Swasti, for sharing that. That means a lot, because I think all of us are actually, when you don't know something, it's very scary. And mental health is something that people don't talk about, and mental health is construed as illness and not as health. When you say physical health, people have a certain image. It's not of illness, but with mental health, usually, usually people have an image of, oh, which problem here, so it's like you know therefore it's important to really actually, like I said, we have just two pillars: destigmatize and demystify. So when you demystify these words, people start understanding. And anxiety is something all of us have it at some point or the other. And it's not all bad. Actually, it propels us into doing many things. And I think we learn a lot through that anxiety. We build our resilience through it. But yeah, it's like that rubber band. How much do we want to stretch? And do we want to give it a bit of a rest so that we can stretch it again? It's about that. It's about honoring the space, just as we say that the rest for the physical body for a marathon runner is important. Similarly, the mental, detangling is also important. So I think parents and everybody around has basically good intentions. They want to, but something that's very fearful, we try and block it off and not talk about it. And like Dr. Bakshi said, that in a sense, it's now out of the closet. So people are talking and people are accepting. In fact, there was one of the articles, I can't recall where I read that, but it just sort of said that if we didn't do anything about it, we will probably be trading another kind of epidemic now, of mental health, because is something that is impacting just about everyone in a myriad ways. The thing is also that, now when people, after this virtual working and virtual learning, when people go back to campus, and have the the in-person learning and working, there will be another set of challenges that would come up in terms of how to connect. And I remember I went to the campus a couple months back, and I met a lot of people, and I was saying hello, and I was constantly processing. I met them online. Do I know them? So it was a lot. It was just something that was so new, because personally for me, I have never spent so much time on the screen as I have in the last 2 years, because my profession has been about people to people contact. In fact, at Ashoka, I'm also famous. I won't write an email. I'll walk across and go talk to someone, because that gives me an opportunity to meet another person. So all that is now changed. And I don't know how and in what ways it would come. Yeah. Please go ahead. Manan, I saw you, and then...
Is that me? Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. I still prefer raising my real hand over my virtual one, but thank you for seeing me either way. My name is Manon. I'm a visiting faculty professor, mainly because of COVID and mainly because it all happened really fast. Last year's offer for the professorship at Ashoka. I'm a neuroscientist. I'm currently teaching cognitive neuroscience, just so you know who I am. And I just like to give my 2 cents. I am also in a sort of living room, kitchen area I'm hiding out in my parents' vacation flat in Grey, northern Germany, where I'm isolating, not because I have COVID, just for doing my work and doing my yoga, which gets me to the boundaries in a moment. So thank you. And thank you for mentioning that out of the closet. I was talking to my mom on the phone last night about, depression and whatever else, finally actually being sort of okay to talk about. I think it's about time. And as I've said once before and thought many times, I think India, especially Ashoka, in my mind, having taught and studied at 3 universities in Germany, 1 in Denmark, 1 in California, 1 in Montreal, and 1 in England, or 2 or 3 in England. I mean, I was shocked about the therapist numbers, but the percentage is as bad everywhere else. Only I've never heard mental health actually being talked about. So in Denmark, for example, the professors kept saying, oh yeah, these long-term sick leaves, they're terrible. And I was the one speaking, I'm saying, well, where do you think they come from? But that wasn't addressed at all. So I think this is great work, and I'm super impressed with the Center for Wellbeing and everything that's going on, and often forward the emails that I get to my international colleagues. About spaces, and I know that all this is recorded, but about spaces, I like to do a mass unmute at the beginning and the end of the class, and I just thought I might add the 5 minutes non-recorded, where people can say in an even safer space than the class, which is being recorded, so that people who are screen tired can watch it after. But yeah, I think there are small things we can do about spaces, which brings me, I'm sort of going in reverse order and zigzagging through my notes, which brings me, none of these are questions, they're more like comments and thoughts I want to share, if I'm okay, and I don't seem to take anybody else's time. The active listening you mentioned, I've been listening to a book by Nancy Klein that's called Time to Think. You're nodding. I'm getting used to this kind of nodding as well, but that's an awesome book. And I finally gave to my director back in Denmark, not knowing what the content really was, because our retreat in Denmark was called Make Time to Think, but really it was a competition to come up with experiments that they could then use for the New Center application. So it wasn't what Nancy Klein talks about, but this is a book, Time to Think. I'll put it in the chat if people don't know it. I think it's awesome. It's a lot about active listening and asking what else there might be that people have on their minds. Okay, so, and Yeah, boundaries. It's a Saturday. I haven't done my yoga practice because I've been emailing and talking to potential project students, and will be after this lecture. But these are fun things that we want to do, so it's not a problem. But it is nice if we take the time for a walk in nature, or yoga, or meditation, or whatever, or cooking, any of those. Yeah, so thank you for listening to me. And one of the measures I could think of to create community and a bit of maybe connection even on the screen would be me being an auditory neuroscientist and passionate for music. I don't know why we don't do more, let me call it chanting, because that in all the embodiment yoga, meditation, whatever courses I'm taking online now, taking a breath together or chanting together, it just has a massive immediate effect. So I just think all those are good things in addition or parallel to counseling and talking about things. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'll be happy to take anybody else's takes on this.
Thanks, Manan, for sharing. Thank you so much. I think this is a great forum actually for sharing and more than questions, because through each other's sharings, we're going to learn new ways of creating more therapeutic spaces. My colleague, I can see Brigu. Brigu, are you there? Yeah, so Brigu and I have also worked, and I think he does a marvelous job of creating those spaces for his students as well. Would you like to share, Brigu? Yeah, Brigu's right now in Providence, so I don't know whether he's in the middle of 20 things as he's tuned in, but anyone else who wants to share and talk about it. Okay, so if there are no questions, I know that I'm pretty sure that there are some thought points that you all may have, something that you may go back with. But I'd like to thank you all once again, because I think the one thing that we as human beings crave for is connect. And thank you for providing that space for connect. And I do feel a lot of connect right now, even when, and I've gotten used to now seeing the boxes on the screen and still being able to see, okay, I know they're there, and for those who have your cameras on, I'm grateful to you, because it's always nice to make that eye contact. Also seeing old friends is nice, but I'd like to end with saying that just create that therapeutic space first for yourself, and then also for the others. Because as they care, self-care is the most important part. And I think going forward, though I talk about strengthening the mental health on campus simply because it came from a felt need, of course, as we look at the present and the future of the Psych clinic, but also from a very strong felt need that there was, that for the students, the mental health challenges have really shown up in their academic spaces. So a lot that depends, because there's a lot, that people start thinking, right from middle school years to where they will go, what the university will be like. And I think the pandemic, I strongly believe that the pandemic has robbed our students from many of the experiences that are a very holistic part of education, because at Ashoka, we keep, the emotional development, the psychological development at the heart of education. But education or any other space, I think we all deserve to have not just good physical health, but also mental health. So I hope going forward, everybody will at least try and visualize mental health in a more positive space and create those therapeutic spaces for yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in, and stay well, stay connected.
Thank you.
Thank you.